to the Summer Devotions, Servanthood edition. Now, if you remember a few days before, we discussed briefly about the dichotomy of God's thoughts on servants and man's. An extreme contrast, like we stated in Isaiah 55:8. My thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. The Lord knew this was an issue with man during his time on earth when we read this, Mark 9:33. And he came to Capernaum, and being in the house, he asked them, what was that ye disputed amongst yourselves by the way? But they held their peace, for by the way they had disputed among themselves who should be the greatest. They probably were somewhat embarrassed about the argument, but they knew they weren't about to be able to hide it from the Lord. So he gathers them together, and we read this, verse 35. He sat down and called the 12, and saith unto them, if any man desire to be first, the same shall be last of all, and servant of all. If you think for 5 seconds that the corporate world believes if you desire to be CEO, maybe you should grab a broom or a mop, you're crazy. Because his ways aren't our ways. See, we're not inclined to serve, prefer one another, or at times even like each other. Servanthood is the way the Lord desires to reach the pinnacle in our ministries. However, we shouldn't serve to try to gain. We should serve because it's a command. 1 Corinthians 7:20. Let every man abide in the same calling wherein he was called. If thou called being a servant, care not for it. But if thou mayest be made free, use it rather. For he that is called in the Lord, being a servant, is the Lord's free man. Likewise, all that he is called being free is Christ's servant. So it doesn't matter, Paul was saying in that time, if you were free or you were bond, you were a servant. This was quite possibly the hardest lesson the disciples had to learn. We read the initial argument about being greatest of all resurfacing later. Luke 22:24. And there was also a strife among them, which of them should be accounted the greatest. Now, this was the second time this happened, obviously, but I think what's worse is where it occurred this time. Let's back up a few verses. Verse 17 of Luke 22. And he took the cup, gave thanks, said, take this, divide it amongst yourselves, for I say unto you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God shall come. And he took bread and gave thanks and brake it and gave unto them, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. This do in remembrance of me. Likewise also the cup after supper, saying, this cup is the New Testament of my blood, which is shed for you. It was the Last Supper, just after communion, that these guys were arguing about who was going to be the greatest. In fact, this is a very intense time because just before verse 24, we read, but behold the hand of him that betrayeth me. It is with me on the table. Jesus is telling them there's one of them going to be betraying him. And their response, which of us is greatest? They're arguing, they're bickering, they're jostling for position. Jesus responds the same way. The servant of all is the greatest. And then he tells one in particular, I worry about you. Satan hath desired you that he may sift you as wheat. Yes, of course, it was Peter, the big mouth. See, servants aren't boastful. They're not shooting off their mouths. They're not asking who's the best or I'm better than you. They have one purpose. That's service. Lord, help me. I need to be a better servant. I need to realize that if I'm going to be anything in his kingdom, that it is going to be a servant. And that's all I should strive to be, a servant. Let him work out the rest. Let him take care of everything else. Just let me be the servant that I need to be. Lord bless. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much.